Hey, we're back another week. Thanks for joining, everyone. We're just doing this walkthrough. We've got a Craft 5 build that we're doing for a client. We're just sharing how we're building it each week. So we're basically doing a check-in with you. We did a check-in with the client yesterday. And so, yeah, we just thought we'd, again, expose kind of how we're doing this. Michael is developing this build and kind of approaching like what changes and how we do things from Craft 4 to Craft 5 as well, and kind of figuring out like what's our new approach going to be. Yeah, so if you didn't watch the first week, go back and watch the first one. You can see kind of our overall approach and how Michael kind of goes through things from design to kind of writing out specs and kind of in our project management system, like how we track things, and then how we organize things, but then also how Michael kind of goes through and adds things to Craft from there. Yeah, so Michael, in the past week then, so it sounds like you've got header and footer kind of locked in and done for the thing. Does that include navigation too?
Yeah, correct. We have the first step, of course, we did the markup, make sure everything was all accessible and well marked up in semantic. And so then it was just a task of going in and hooking it up to the Craft data that we are using for the navigation and the footer. So that's kind of out of the way. We've got those two sort of global main parts of the pages working. And so now most of the work that I've been doing now has been centering on or starting up the lion's shares of the content work, which is this content builder row field, which we are supplying on different pages so the site admins can use these blocks throughout the site. Doesn't matter, what page they're building out. So that's kind of where we begin. It's also noted me the favorite part of the project for me. That's when I get to take those static designs and convert them into markup to CSS and some JavaScript. That's always the fun part.
Cool. Well, why don't you show us that? And I think like, yeah, do you have template stuff yet? Are you actually getting into the routing and adding things to tweak templates?
Yeah. What I did is basically, since this is a content builder field, I set up like a skeleton sort of thing. So it's just going to be outputting. We created the partials, the template partials, but just throw a header in there saying, this is a hero, this is a carousel, this is just so we got the code going.
Can you show that? Actually, can you start off with that, just kind of like that skeleton thing that you're doing, and then move to one of the ones that you maybe have already started on? I know we covered some of that last week a bit, but like, I think just show us then what you've done this week. I think it'd be interesting to see how you're going through that. I'm going to start sharing your screen from there, and then yeah, walk us through what your.
Okay, so what I've done here, we could probably look at this now in a bit in live preview. Now that we have this sort of skeleton base in place, but what we're doing is we have a test page where we're having these different row components that we have in here. And this is kind of what we discussed in our last one about, all the data is there, it's structured, it's set up with all the different options they need for all of these components. And since we created a sort of a skeleton in the background, we can start looking at it in live preview, or we can look at it in whatever you want. So as you can see, the components are now coming together with the data that we have. The images aren't in there because we're hooking up the client with AWS and ImageIX to handle the assets, so we can control these with get WebP and AVF formats. But yeah, so these are the component trees coming in, so we can start seeing how they're working now. This is a kind of a fun one because we're using CSS scroll animations controlled by CSS, which is pretty neat. And yeah, so in these blocks is the background images. It could be an image or it could be a video that's looping in the background silently as well. So, and as you can see, these are the ones that I haven't done yet. So these are the ones that we're still working on. These are just to output the blocks. Okay, project highlight row, what have you. This is the content's all here. It's in there. It's sort of like a test page. It's a good place also to call while we're working it out, to like stress test the components. If a heading gets too large or it's too small, or there's more elements that then were anticipated by the designer, you can kind of do that here. Other times we've used some software like Storybook to kind of build out these components in isolation by themselves. But doing it this way basically gives you pretty much the same sort of a feeling of how far you can stretch components.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we're at. And like I said, this is the funnest part for me. to get all this stuff done.
Can you show, so like the code itself, do you have that up where you can show like how you're doing that routing? Did it change in Craft 5, or is it the same of like how are doing the entry types, even like the whole routing of like knowing which?
Let me see. Let me see if I can show something here. Let me see if I'll...
While you're pulling up that, so like, yeah, our approach is we do a bunch of kind of classic entry types. Entry types now you can't really. We do entry types now that you can use entry types in a lot of different places. And it's like, how do we talk about entry types? But on a sections, we typically build out for pages for our clients. They'll always have a pages section that is a structured section that has the different entry types that represent different templates essentially. And so that have their own content layout and whatnot from there. So that's what Michael's doing too, is like all these pages will really kind of sit inside of a pages section. And then from there, so that's kind of that routing. Can you zoom? It's super blurry. Would you mind just zooming on that?
Yeah, see if I can get in here. Make things a little bit larger here. Let's see. So let me just open up something that is kind of like the content itself. So yeah, we're working in a general page. This is just looping through output here. Where we're pulling in the rows of based on the field, and we're just using this from right now at the moment. There is a new feature in Craft 5 where you can assign an entry type, a specific partial to render it out. But since we do have a little more complications with nested sort of entry fields and entry types, I'm kind of sticking to our old way of doing it, and then we're going to see later on if it's still possible to try the new way out. But I'd rather get this one built. So as you can see, this is pulling in rows that are coming in, and the row componentry we've set up here. So for like an existing one, let me just see here. This is just a call out row. So we're pulling in this. This one has some variations on it. So depending on the variation, we're just going through and outputting the data here.
Got it. Okay. It's hard to read your file system over there, but like you basically have under templates, you'll have pages was the original thing, pages, then types, and then that was the file that we were kind of showing. And now you're in templates, and components, and then the content components. And these are all the different row types, row content. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of these are all just they don't have anything in them yet. They're just a header.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Whoa! Look at this inception. This is
wow.
I'll drop that. This fancy new toy we're playing with. Cool. Yeah. So then, do you want to walk through? Yeah, I guess what's specifically been the progress, and like, what did without I guess sharing maybe too much, but what did the team at SFS say yesterday when you showed them stuff? Like, what did you show them, and what was their reaction?
Well, they were quite surprised actually. The current system that they're working with now is kind of a hodgepodge sort of thing that they've been working with, which has plugins here, plugins there. I believe it's a WordPress site that they have. And what they thought was really refreshing was sort of clean interface and the authoring experience that we're building with Craft for them. So it seemed it's logical to them. Being able, the way we're constructing things in these rows, and we give you a custom row that has columns within there, and they have some content blocks. They put it seemed all very logical to them. So I think they were pleasantly surprised when we showed them the sort of a preview of the design, or not design, the content entry experience.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Okay. Well, I'm excited for them in the sense of then what you've built out. So your approach right now is you're kind of building out all of the different row, like basically the predefined rows, as we kind of call them, right? So like the rows that they're not nested within specific columns in a designed layout kind of choice where you can have a row with columns in it. Like these are things that will take up the entire row. It's kind of the row component, kind of classic matrix kind of approach, a non-neo matrix approach, right? It's just straight up matrix. But you're building it in a way where it's going to be nested or side by side with that custom row option, right? So like you can have predefined design templated rows, and then you'll be able to, I think we showed that last week a bit, as well as you'll have a custom row option from there. So right now your focus is building out all the predefined rows. Is that correct? And then kind of last you'll do the custom row and column kind of configuration stuff for the more design abilities.
Yeah, because in the course of building out some of these sort of pre-built rows based off the design, some of the content blocks that the user will be able to put in those custom rows with columns are in there already. So we're kind of building those out as parcels already and kind of saving time to get that working. The other thing, which you didn't mention, we're giving them a custom row, but we're also giving them a reusable content row.
Ooh.
So this is something that, yeah, coming from the design, I was looking at it, and it's a Craft 5 thing, which, well, no, we've done this in the past before, where we've given a channel where that has fields or enter types for like rows and blocks. So they're not having to re-enter certain content on a block that they want to use on multiple pages with the same data. So the way to solve that is create a channel, and with the same fields that the matrix block has, or row, what have you, and then we can just link to it with
You have that built
an
out?
entry
Is that
field.
what's showing?
Yeah, why not? So the thing with Craft 5 here is that, let me open it up here. So the cool thing about Craft 5 now is that entry types are everywhere. So and once they're not tied to just sections. So as you know, you might know the matrix blocks can use entry types. So I was thinking about, well, that's perfect actually, because right now we have in our content builder field, we have, let me just go and show you in here. For some in the entry types now in Craft 5 are like sort of decoupled entity. So we have all of these, different row types that here. Also nice touch is the icons and coloring of rows, which kind of helps you identify it.
Wait,
So
hold
what
on.
we did,
Side trail on that one. What are you doing your coloring for? Like, how are you organizing this? Because I know a feature request we have is bring back field groups
yeah,
for better organization. But so how are you overcoming the lack
yeah,
of field groups?
yeah. That's the one gripe that I have about this, and also extends to the fields is they remove field groups. So now we've got entry types by itself. But you can come up with this long list, and it can be a bit confusing sometimes to know what is going to be used or what's specific for that you want as a matrix row, or is it something, this is an entry type that's for an entry type for a page. So what I'm doing, the sort of convention that I'm following is that if it's a block, meaning in this case it's a block of content that can either go within a column in the custom row builder, or it's a block by itself that's going in a more single column layout page, and we give it the name block. It's not high tech at all, but if it's a row component, then we know it's a row.
Yeah.
Anything you have a custom row form block. I'm using some color coding so that when they show up in the builders, so green would kind of like simplify anything that's media oriented. Orange is anything that's sort of like text oriented, and blue is for like modular stuff that like hooking up forms or anything else that will come in. Yeah, and then going through it and giving, assigning icons and for project. These are actually pages or entry types that are built out in the build. Yeah, different componentry. That's settings. It just makes it a little bit easier to know to find things.
Yeah.
So
there's a
yeah,
lot of meaning for you, and when you look at this page, like there's a lot of kind of just visual information that kind of tells you what's happening. Cool.
Yeah. So getting back to the reusable content section. So this is just a channel, right? What we have here. So we have so what we're doing here, if you is reusing the same entry types on the this channel in itself, so we don't have to worry about duplication. The problem that we had to have in the past is that if anything changed on a row or block, you have to change it in two places. You'd have to change it on the entry type in the channel, and you'd also have to change the fields on the matrix block. But being that now it's the same, or we can reuse those same entry types on the channel. Let me just go and I'll show you here. I want to get back to the entry types. So say I have this call out row, custom row. So this is being used as an entry type for a matrix block, right? But we can use conditionals on this case. So now I can say, okay, I'm going to show this row title field, right? And as a conditional on it saying, only show this title field if the entry type is being used on a section of reusable content, which is the channel, because it doesn't make sense to have a title field on a matrix block. Really, it might in some cases, but in a lot of cases it isn't. So we did that, and that way, if you're entering the content, you'll get that field. Would make sense. You're going to want a title so you remember what it is, and using it in that channel. So yeah, it was kind of a neat way of doing it. We don't have to worry about duplication. If something changes on an entry, a matrix block, we're changing it on the entry type, so it'll automatically change when we're reusing that entry type for the channel. So as you can hear, you can see now we have this row title here, and these are all the same fields that we have for, custom column, where we have the settings, the content blocks.
So that could be like, I have a call out that I use, like thinking about the authoring experience then. Mm-hmm. So I have a call out that I use on all of my services pages, for example, right? And I don't have to recreate that call out on every single service page. I can just create it here, and then each service page relate it in, like kind of read it, bring it in, right?
Yeah, and so to tie that back to with the content builder itself, we've also created a row within the content builder, which just basically links you to whatever the reusable content that you have. So you could add a row. Let me just jump down here real quick. So we can add a row of reusable content row. Nice. And the only thing that's going to do is link you to whatever you have in there, and that can be reused again.
Got it.
However you want.
And this site, the search that we're going to do for the site is purely in the project section. I know one of the drawbacks possibly of this option of a reusable is if you had to search on entries, right? If you're doing craft-based searching on entries, like does that reusable content get connected to the entry itself? So if you search that, like does craft know that content belongs, to this entry because it's a related one? So that's something I think that if you have a site where you're needing to search, you're like, oh, that content is on this page, but it's not informing my search results, then you probably have to solve for that in a different way. We typically use, we have some sites that are using craft-based search, but we start moving into external systems, Meilisearch or Catalia, and so that we can then tell it what to put in there, so that kind of global reusable content doesn't become an issue in that sense, because we define what values to pass through.
Yeah, and in fact, on this project itself, we are taking that approach on the project section of the site, where we're offloading the search abilities to Meilisearch, and as you said, it gives us a chance for us to pull in that extra content and to be a part of the index itself.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more. I know, so to give if anybody wants to keep following along, like the things that we've got, like what are the things you probably more than I do, but I guess fill in the gaps what I have. So we've got all of this page builder stuff that have all the designs pieces in it, which are going to have these custom or predefined rows to then custom rows. We're going to have templates for essentially their blogs, calling like stories. It's like an index kind of listing page for that, and the actual detail pages. They're going to have projects, like a project listing, which is kind of cool. The kind of the cool feature of this, of like the map and the filtering of like all their projects. Because they've been working for 50 years. They've been doing projects. And so just to show off all that stuff. What else is there that's coming down the road that we're going to see as we walk through these, as you build it out?
Well, there's also an integration with a third-party service that we're working with specifically for the projects, which is Open Asset is the name of the service. So this is a product that they are constantly working in. They're in this project, product always for setting, everything from like square meters of a project, or getting all the data, gathering all the data together to make proposals for. So we've figured, well, since they're already in there, why don't we just use that data? So we're going to be doing a third-party integration with that service to pull in the data that we need for projects and let them augment or the data on the site using Craft, which is what Craft I think is better for. It's a content management system, so it will allow them to make the content a little bit more fuller and more robust for the site. That's the idea, and then we're syncing all that stuff up to a Meilisearch instance as well to get to really fast filtering and searching.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to all that. I know the client is too. Michael, thank you. We'll be back again next week. We'll see what you've done over this coming week. Sound good?
Perfect.